it's Monday morning, and that means Bible stories. Today, I want to tell you the story of a king that is referred to as the last good king of Israel. Well, technically of Judah. You know, after Solomon misbehaved and everything, that God said he would tear the kingdom from him. Then after he passed, 10 tribes were now Israel, 2 tribes now Judah. That's Judah and Benjamin. So over time, Israel had its own kings, Judah had its own kings. Then we now come to the main character for today, King Josiah. Josiah was the great-grandson of Hezekiah. You know, the Hezekiah that prayed to God, oh, don't let me die, add more years to my life. Yes, that's Hezekiah. And we know Hezekiah was a good king. That's why he was able to pray that prayer to God. But after him, his son, Manasseh, that was a horrible king. In fact, the Bible said he provoked God terribly. There was nothing he did not do, to the point that he carved an idol and took it into the temple of God, the temple that Solomon built. He put the idol there and people were coming to worship it. Turned the whole of Judah to worshiping idols. They said he set up idols on every hill, every mountain, everywhere. He was just a horrible king. And then when he died, his son Ammon became king, and Ammon was even worse than him. It was so bad that 2 years into Ammon's reign, his servants conspired to kill him, because he was not only against God, he was also wicked to people. So he only reigned for 2 years and they killed him. And then his son Josiah became king, also one of the youngest kings. He was 8 years old when he became king. And the Bible recorded that when he turned 16, he began to seek God with all his heart. And the Bible actually said he followed in the footsteps of David. He did not waver to the left or to the right. Said all through his life, he served God with his whole heart. In fact, the Bible records that out of all the kings in the divided Israel and Judah, he said there was no king like Josiah who followed God with oneness of heart, never deviating to the right or to the left. He was an amazing king. And not only that, after he started to seek God and to know God, he went around the whole of Judah, pulling down every idol, every shrine his grandfather and father had set up. He destroyed everything, burnt the idols, and he went into the temple, brought out the idols, destroyed everything. He was so focused on serving God. And then after that, in his 18th year, he gathered money, and then he sent his scribe Shaphan to go to the high priest Hezekiah. He said, go to the high priest, give him this money, and also tell him to look into the temple, any money that has been gathered and everything. It's time for them to start restoring the temple to the way it was before, to rebuild anywhere that has been broken, to clean it, to do everything. So his servant went, gave the money and the instructions to Hezekiah, the chief priest, and told him, the king said, let the Levites return to their duties in the temple. You know, the Levites were the priests and all that. I said, clean out the temple, restore it. The ark that was taken out of the temple, because the ark at that time was no more in the temple, he said, no more will you have to bear the burden of the ark. Return it to its rightful place in the temple. And so Hezekiah got the Levites and they started doing that, and they were cleaning. And while cleaning, the chief priest Hezekiah found the book of the law. Now, this book of the law is not the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments were written in stone. Remember when Moses broke them in anger, and then God told him, you will chisel it yourself, and he wrote it, and that was put inside the ark. That's the 10 commandments. But the book of the law is actually the law of all the instructions God gave Moses regarding how the Israelites were to conduct themselves, how they are to do marriage, who they are to marry, how they are to serve him, the law of the Sabbath, the law of the Passover, how the Levites are to do the order of service, how this one is to be done, as in how they were to live their lives. It was like the constitution for Israel. That was the book that had long been abandoned. It was when they were cleaning out the temple that they saw it. So Hezekiah took it, gave it to the king's servant and said, give this to the king. Tell him we have found the book of the law. So when the servants returned to Jerusalem where the king stays, he told the king, he said, the chief priest gave me a book for you. And the king said it should be read to him. So the whole book of the law was read from beginning to end. And when Josiah heard it, he tore his clothes, fell on his face and said, we have violated every commandment of God, as in there is none at all that we have not violated. He said, how great must be the wrath of God against us. Immediately he said, send for the chief priest. The chief priest came. He said, you chief priest, everyone, go and inquire of the prophetess Huldah, as at that time it was a prophetess they had, not a prophet. Huldah, he said, go and ask her, what are we to do? What is the Lord saying concerning this? And they went, and the prophetess told them. He said, here is the word of the Lord. He said, tell the person who sent you that my anger is quickened against Judah. He said, and I will exact my wrath on them. He said, but for the king, because he has humbled himself and dedicated himself to seeking me, he said, this calamity that will fall on Judah will not fall on him. He will go to his rest peacefully before all the things will happen to Judah. And they went and they told the king. And so the king rose up, gathered all his officials. He said, let us go to the temple. And they all went. They all went to the temple. He now said all Judah should be gathered to him. And then everybody in Judah was gathered to him. And he said the book should be read. And the book was read to everybody. And he said, have you heard? This is how we have violated the command of the Lord. He said, but now we are going to make a covenant to go back to worshiping the Lord our God, that no more will we turn away from him. Let us make this covenant. And the king made the covenant that he would serve only God all the days of his life. And all the people bowed their face, and they also made the same covenant that they will serve God only all the days of their lives. And then he said, according to what he read in the book, he said, we need to do the Passover, the Passover for the atonement of sin, for returning to God, exactly as it was written in the books. And so he told everybody, start preparing. We must hold the Passover. And out of his own personal one, the Bible records that he gave 300,000, I believe, goats and sheep, and 3,000 cattle to be used for the Passover. His officials also gave massively and everything, and the Levites did that. They did the atonement for sin, the one for sacrifice, this thing. And the Bible actually recorded that the last time such a Passover was held in Israel was during the time of Samuel, meaning it didn't even hold in the time of David. You can imagine, it was Josiah that did this. And the Bible said the King Josiah, restored true worship to Judah. Said he restored true worship. Said, and all the people throughout his lifetime, they served only God. They worshipped God. They did everything in their lives according to how it was written in the book of the law, the constitution God gave them. And that was how time went on, and Israel was at peace. Everything was going fine. God was prospering them because of the king, a king who sought God with all his heart. Then a time came in the 31 year of his reign. Assyria was fighting a country, I can't remember the name of the country right now, but Assyria was fighting a country, and the king of Assyria sent for the king of Egypt to come and aid him in the war. So the king of Egypt came, and where he was passing, where he would pass through, was very close to Judah. It was actually by the river Euphrates going. That was where he was going to fight. And you know, in those days, whenever any king is coming with his army, you take it as an offensive. He's coming to war against me and all that. And so immediately Josiah gathered his army and said, we are going to war against the king of Egypt, Pharaoh Necho, that was his name. And the king of Egypt sent a message when he heard, he sent a message to Josiah. He said, what have I to do with you, king of Judah? I'm not here for you this time. He said, I am going on the Lord's business. He said, for what the war I'm going to fight was instructed by the God of heaven. He said I should make haste. He said, that is why I am passing here to go to that war. He said, if you come against me, you will not be fighting against me. You will be fighting against the God who sent me. He said, do not attempt to interrupt God's business. That was Josiah's mistake. On a normal day, shouldn't he have inquired? There were still prophets in Judah. He could have gone to inquire, should I go to the war? And they would have told him the word from the Lord. But he didn't. Instead, the Bible records he ignored the king of Egypt's message, and he gathered he now disguised himself like an ordinary person. He said, oh, that he will not know it is me. And he went to war with his army. And the Bible reports that he was shot by an archer and wounded on the battlefield. And immediately his people carried him. They took him back home, and he died. He became king at the age of 8. He ruled for 31 years. He died at the age of 39. Do you think that was God's will for someone as good as that? No. And this is where my message for today comes in. Our safety resides in hearing instructions from God and obeying. That is where our safety resides. Josiah was a good king. He was an amazing king. But you see, nobody can stand against God's purpose. The war he was going to fight was not his war. It wasn't even his country they were coming to fight against. They were passing, just that they were passing through. It's understandable as a king, he feels agitated seeing a whole army by his destiny. But when he heard that, the message from the Pharaoh, he should have hesitated and said, okay. And you know, I kept wondering. I said, why didn't he find out? Or did he think because Pharaoh was the king of a pagan country, he could not be used by God? That's another arrogance a lot of believers have now. We believe nobody else can be used by God, especially if they are not believers. But sometimes even a word of wisdom from them can actually be from God. King Josiah ignored that, and even when he wasn't sure, he should still have inquired. I mean, David, we see how many wars he will ask. Should I go? Should I fight this war? Well, how should I fight it? So many other kings after him. Even we saw it with Hezekiah. They'll be like, they'll hear of a nation coming to attack them. They'll go before the Lord, help us, and God will tell them what to do. Don't fight, just sing, blow one. Some you say, when you're about to fight, come from the mountaintop. Some, when you're about to fight, come from the back. He will give them. But Josiah did not inquire of the Lord. He went to a war, interrupting a man that God had given assignments. Pharaoh told him, he said, and I am about God's business, and he told me to hurry. He said, in fact, there are some versions that said, he told him, he said, you will be fighting against the Lord, not me. He said, why should the Lord destroy you? He went to fight. He was struck by an arrow. He was returned home and he died at the age of 39. And the Bible records that all Israel mourned for him. In fact, Jeremiah wrote a lament, a funeral song for him, and they said till now it is sung in Israel in honor of King Josiah. And that was the last good king that came out of both Israel and Judah, because soon afterwards his son, the one that came after, and they were just doing nonsense, and then Nebuchadnezzar came and carried all of them to Babylon, and that was the end of kings in Israel and Judah. So I hope you learned from this, and I'll see you again next week. Please, please, please inquire of the Lord regarding important life decisions. I'm sure that was not God's will for Josiah. I'm very, very sure that was not his will. He said he would live to an old age and he would be gathered to his people before calamity befalls Judah. But 39, that's definitely not old. Bye.